As you've picked up, this service is inspired by the Buddhist practice of the metta meditation, the invitation to hold compassion and love for ourselves, and then move compassion and love into the world, to hold it for ever widening circles of care and concern, and ultimately holding love, care, and compassion for all of creation. This meditation is a profound way to practice interdependence and to soften our achy hearts. It isn't an easy practice. As you may have noticed today, it isn't long before we might feel the friction of resistance and find ourselves craving an escape. Perhaps noticing the ways we question our worthiness and the worthiness of others. Sometimes I notice the resistance in myself, and I'm reminded that the spiritual path isn't easy, and that the resistance and friction is a place of growth, deepening, and possibility for more authentic presence, honesty, and clarity in my life. The voices of worthiness and unworthiness are especially loud when I hold the rage of injustice. Rage I understand as wholly necessary and essential to a spiritual path that is brave, courageous, and willing to transform systemic injustice in our world with the love that folds us into divine connection with all beings and all creation. The metta meditation is an invitation to notice how deeply interconnected we truly are, to rediscover love and compassion, and to nurture loving kindness in a deeply broken world. To notice how much cruelty is alive, well, and thriving in our world, uplifted and amplified by powerful leaders and co-conspirators who seem to take pleasure in the abuse of power. It's clear to me that we are living in the presence of a spiritual crisis and a moral reckoning as we continue to bear witness to the normalization of cruelty in our world. And we might also notice that the structures and infrastructure of cruelty is woven into the fabric of the United States. It is the architecture of history that continues to fortify the present moment in which we bear witness to rising authoritarianism. It fortifies a present moment that sees our immigrant friends, family, neighbors terrorized by paramilitary forces. It is the assault on trans and non-binary beloveds and their right to live and flourish. It is in the denial of food and health care to disabled, poor, and aging communities. Reverend Dr. William Barber, the pastor who leads the Call to Moral Mondays, calls this policy murder, characterized by death and cruelty. This past week, watching events in Chicago, a city I called home for a very long time, I was reminded of the work of Adam Sewer, who wrote an article in 2018 for The Atlantic that identified that for a growing political movement in the United States, quote, "The cruelty is the point." In a conversation with NPR in 2021, He said this when asked about what cruelty is. Quote, "What I mean by cruelty is specifically the demonization of a particular groups in order to deny them rights or exclude them from polity. Cruelty serves to violently separate us from each other and our shared humanity, and it wants us to slink away in fear. And there is no way that Unitarian Universalists, with our faith anchored in a moral vision that holds love at the center of our lives, will hide from the truth. There is no way that we won't tell the truth.
We sure did yesterday.
Amen. There is no way we will step aside from this conversation and not bear witness to the suffering of our communities, the cruelty and the abuse of power. And it's not just a political crisis. It's a moral and spiritual crisis that demands generative moral clarity about our values and what we're willing to do to affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person, preserve the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and of course, the possibilities of democracy. Perhaps this is why there is a weaponization of empathy and compassion, labeling them as weak and powerless. I suspect there is an awareness that compassion and empathy are superpowers. They cut through the lies and propaganda, and it brings us together in a shared struggle for freedom and liberation. It calls us to see that the rights of every human being on our planet, to thrive and flourish, to be safe, to be happy, for the earth to be treated with love and care, that this matters to more of us than we realize. I've been thinking a lot these last few months about Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor, writer, activist, professor, teacher, and Nobel Peace Prize winner. Dr. Wiesel gave the graduation speech when I completed my undergraduate degree at Michigan State. At the time, the war in Bosnia was just ending, and the atrocities of that war, especially meeting refugees in Turkey, had opened my eyes to the horrors of authoritarianism and the strategic dehumanization and destruction of human beings. At the time, Dr. Wiesel's presence felt like a sign. I was struggling with what I had witnessed and what I had learned about human cruelty and suffering. Dr. Wiesel was known for his writings on the horror of indifference, and I return to that lesson daily as a spiritual practice. And I see our faith inviting us to resist indifference too. I hear this message in Dr. Wiesel's words when he writes, quote, "This is what we must do, not sleep well when people suffer anywhere in the world, not sleep well when someone is persecuted, not sleep well when people are hungry all over here and there, not sleep well when there are people sick and nobody is there to help them, not sleep well when anyone somewhere needs you." We ought to be restless and haunted by cruelty, moved, shaken, and stirred out of indifference and into action. compassion can wake us up to our moral center, to our shared humanity, to a call to action. When we are able to hold on to compassion, to nurture compassion for ourselves, for each other, for the world, we disrupt the dehumanization, cruelty, and the trend towards indifference. And we must attend to this spiritual superpower, care for it, and be intentional with our practice of connecting with our shared humanity in our common home. Yesterday, we saw a magnificent outpouring of care, compassion, and love. As of last night, when I finally turned off the news, over 7 million Americans and people around the world in solidarity with our struggle gathered joyously to reclaim the possibility that our country might live into the dream of justice for all, even as we struggle with that dream, to disrupt the violence gripping our nation. This, too, is a practice of compassion and hope and promise, generative of a dream that brings us together across our differences. The invitation today is to find your practice, lean into it, and discover how you tend to the light of compassion and empathy in yourself, so you too can remain connected to the love that holds us and connects us to each other and our commitments to a world where all beings are safe, healthy, happy, at ease, filled with loving kindness, and at peace. May it be so. Ashe, and blessed be. Please rise.